going to hear from Melissa Coe and Tiffany Wang from DataKind UK. Just a quick introduction. Melissa is a senior data analyst at the Health Foundation with a passion for improving healthcare and optimizing patient experience using data science. Previously, she worked in quality improvement and patient experience, consulting with clinicians to develop metrics and data visualization tools for QI projects. Tiffany is a data consultant with an engineering background. She has recently relocated to the UK after hopping around various countries. As a volunteer for DataKind UK, she finds joy in contributing her data skills to help charities. Their talk will be on how to increase recycling using data. So if you can just give them a round of applause.
Thank you. So as just said, I'm Melissa Coe. This is Tiffany Wang. We are volunteers for DataKind UK. Can I just get a quick show of hands of anybody who has heard of or volunteered with DataKind UK before? Yay. Okay, decent amount of the room who's going to be thinking, I already know all of this, why are you telling me? We are both members of the community committee, and we're here to talk to you today about one of the data dive projects that we did last year around increasing recycling using data. So just a quick run through of what we're going to go through. We'll talk a little bit about who DataKind is, what we do, talk about the project that specifically looked at electricals recycling, and how you can also get involved further. And somewhere there are stickers and flyers as well for this. So DataKind UK is a charity with a vision of a strong, thriving third sector that embraces data science to become more impactful. These are some of the organizations that we've worked with previously. They're charities, social enterprises, and public sector organizations. And of course, Material Focus, who is the organization that we worked with on this particular project. Just a quick overview of the programs and services that we provide. We provide free data support to charities, social enterprises, and local authorities across the UK. We match data science volunteers on projects that deliver insights to third sector organizations, and we're also a community of data science professionals, so I see lots of familiar faces around the room, and we provide support and advice to each other on a variety of different platforms. There's a variety of project types as well that DataKind has worked with in the past, ranging from one-off advice and guidance to third sector organizations, as well as longer-term pro bono consulting work. It's been over 10 years since DataKind started, and since then, we've partnered with over 83 charities on more than 100 different projects with more than 2,200 volunteers. That's roughly £3.8 million worth of pro bono support that's been given to the third sector. And as you can see, lots of one-to-one data support meetings and projects, and also things where we actually created a data product. In DataKind's 10 years of experience, DataKind UK, we've seen four main ways that data and data science can be used by charities. It's really helpful for them to understand who their clients actually are, what the need and demand would be for their charity, evaluate the specific services that they're providing, and also improve any operational efficiency. So, as I mentioned previously, DataKind UK has many different ways of connecting with charities and volunteers, including both longer and shorter term partnerships. But today we're going to be talking a bit about data dive projects. So I saw some hands raised in the room of people who've been to data dives. If you don't know, data dives happen over 3 to 4 months with a core team of 4 expert volunteer data scientists who are supported by the DataKind UK staff. These core volunteers work with our third sector partners to show them how to prepare their data and ask the right questions for an analysis. And this all culminates in a Data Dive weekend event, which is a hackathon-style event where an additional 20 volunteers-ish come together over a Saturday and Sunday to support the charity and help answer the questions that they've come up with. The fact that we've got so many people involved in these and the diversity of the people who get involved means that it's really useful for charities who are looking to explore a large range of data with a quick turnaround time. Why is this important? A lot of charities don't actually have dedicated data resources, and these projects can be the first time that they're visualizing their data at all. So we hope to provide them with impactful insights that they can take away and use to advocate for their causes, as well as inspire them to continue on in their data journey and dig more into the data. So the project that we're talking about today is with an organization called Material Focus and was on how to increase electricals recycling using data. So I want you to think about how many electricals you have in your house right now. So there's big appliances, you've got washers and dryers, fridge, but there's also lots of other small things. So anything that's got a plug or a battery or a cable, that counts as an electrical. What do you do with them when they stop working and you no longer need to use them? Raise your hand if you also got an old phone or charger that's sitting in a drawer somewhere collecting dust and you're just hoarding it. Okay, people who don't have their hands raised, have you just binned it in the trash? Oh, some good people out here. Well, all of us, with all of our electrical waste, are contributing to the 23.9 kilograms of electrical waste that was produced per capita in the UK in 2023. This is the second highest in the world, behind Norway, who we are on track to outpace this year. Material Focus reported that also in 2023, in the previous year, 471 million out of over 500 million cheap electronic goods, so these are things like disposable vapes and decorative lights, were binned. That's around 94% of all of these things bought and then binned later on. And this all contributes to over 850 million pounds of precious metals, which are contained in our electricals, just being tossed away each year. And if we were to recycle all of these, it could reduce as much carbon dioxide as taking 1.3 million cars off the road. So this is a huge problem. I'm not going to say that I'm in any way an expert on recycling and electrical waste, but it sounds like a dire situation to me. Luckily, we've got Material Focus, which is an independent not-for-profit who wants to stop electricals from being hoarded and binned, but rather increase recycling and reuse. They began in 2020, and they focus on they do this in a few different ways. So one is to fund research on what the barriers are for getting people to recycle. The second is that they partner with retailers and local authorities to try to increase the number of collection points where electricals are accepted so that it's a little bit easier for you to go and give your electricals to somewhere where it will be recycled. And then the final one is raising awareness and providing practical information to consumers. So that's through some of the different campaigns that they run, including HypnoCat, which is one of the faces behind Recycle Your Electricals. If you go on their website, you can look up your postcode and find where you can go and recycle your electricals. Highly recommend. So for this project, we worked closely with Material Focus. There were 4 core DataKind UK volunteers who took the lead on this project, spending 6 weeks prior to the Data Dive weekend preparing. Weekends are short, obviously, so to get the most out of other volunteers' time, these volunteers worked with Material Focus to develop and scope specific research questions that would provide actionable insights for them and could be addressed with available data. They also investigated other potential data sources and cleaned and documented the data so that on the Saturday morning when all the other volunteers arrived, they could get right to cracking on the data, on the research questions. So this is what Material Focus and the core volunteer team came up with. Material Focus was particularly interested in looking at what factors affect recycling rates in the UK and whether there are any particular local authorities that have a high potential for increasing recycling. They also wanted to look at how recycling points are distributed across the country and whether they were more or less accessible. And related to this, how long it takes for people to travel to these recycling points and whether there are ways to reduce this travel time. So here's some of the data that we used for the project. Material Focus provided data on recycling locations, which includes each of the recycling centers' capabilities and what kinds of items they accept, since not all recycling centers will accept all items, and some geographic information about where those recycling centers are located. There's also data on WEEE, which is Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment, and this includes government-collected data that's used to measure how the UK is doing in terms of reaching its targets for recycling electrical waste under WEEE regulations. They use data as well from the Travel Time API, which includes isochrones, which are basically you're mapping geographical areas with which it takes the same amount of time to reach a particular location. So an area where it takes 15 minutes, under 15 minutes or less to reach a recycling center, or 30 minutes or 60 minutes or less to reach this recycling center, either by car or without a car. And lastly, they looked at the UK population grid, where to find out the number of people who are living in each 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer square area across the UK map. So the first topic was to look at what factors increase recycling and whether there is a potential to change that. So volunteers started by looking specifically at different local authorities, which is really helpful for material focus to think about who they might be able to approach to work with in the future. There was also a lot of exploratory analysis to understand what kinds of factors were associated with certain local authorities' higher or lower electricals recycling. And before we dive into the results, just to give you a heads up, because of the hackathon-style nature of all of this, some of these graphs will be quite rough, and they're produced in rapid turnaround by a variety of different volunteers. We'll do our best to pull out the relevant bits from this. So the first thing they looked at was to rank the different local authorities by the amount of recycling, electricals recycling per capita. That goes by weight of recycling, and you can see in the blue or green, these are the top 20 local authorities across the country which are recycling, and the red is the bottom 20. One of the interesting findings here was that the very top local authority is Isle of Scilly, who actually had partnered with Material Focus previously on a project to increase electricals recycling. So that was actually a really nice finding for Material Focus that was valuable for them to know what kind of impact they might be making. Now, of course, this is not to say good or bad local authorities. There's a lot of different contexts in the local authorities that influence their ability to recycle. So to tease out some of these factors, some of the volunteers looked at whether things like population size and density might be a factor. So as you can see in these bars, this groups local authorities into deciles by most to least dense from their population. And you can see that least dense areas tend to have higher weight of recycling electrical goods as compared to more dense areas which seem to recycle less, and that's predominantly London all the way over on the right. This is the same thing on the bottom, where London has the lowest percentage of general waste that gets recycled as compared to other regions, if you look at the bottom graph. So it's just worth noting generally that not just e-waste, but just recycling as a whole tends to be lower in areas where there's high-density housing, social deprivation, and the factors for all of this is complex, and it includes things like infrastructure and lack of space to be able to separate and sort out recycling or store it somewhere, and also difficulty of those local authorities to provide convenient services for all the people that they're serving. So again, not going to make you try and read all of these, but delving deeper into the factors that were associated with recycling, some volunteers looked at the correlation between different demographics from the 2021 census for each local authority and the weight per capita of electricals that those local authorities recycled. So a few interesting findings here. Areas with lower rates of car ownership and higher rates of traveling to work via public transport were correlated with less recycling. So the bottom here shows people who are traveling via public transport, and the top is, the blue is the people who own cars, or proportions of people who own cars, with the red being proportions of people who don't have cars. And to clarify, the red is showing any negative correlations with electrical weight, and the blue is showing positive correlations. Should have said that at the start. Other findings were that people who are retired recycle more, and areas with more students recycle less. And there's also less recycling in areas where more people are renting homes. So again, the red here is a negative correlation between the proportion of people who are renting, and the blue is a positive correlation of higher recycling where people are owning their homes. So obviously, these are all quite related to the same area of densely populated areas, which are more likely to have students and renters and people without cars recycling less. And then finally, some of the volunteers who were looking into this topic tried a few predictive models. While most models weren't great at predicting recycling weight per capita, there were some quite interesting findings when they looked at which features were most associated with or were most predictive of the weight recycled. So this figure comes from a volunteer's random forest model, which somewhat predicted recycling in local authorities. One thing you can see if you're looking at the axis label is the similar things to what I just mentioned before, in addition to work hours per week being quite an important feature in this model, where areas where people were more likely to work more hours per week also had less recycling. Perhaps the most interesting feature actually for material focus here was less what predicts recycling, but actually what didn't predict recycling as much as they thought it would. So curbside pickup, which is the bottom bar, or the density of curbside pickup available in local authorities, did not seem to be as predictive of recycling as material focus had expected. So curbside pickup would be where a local authority can provide a service to come and get your old electricals directly from right outside your door on the curbside. So this was quite an interesting finding for material focus and counter to what they had expected. And there's definitely further digging that's needed to understand why that is and whether that's to do with the kinds of data, but definitely something for material focus to go back and reevaluate in terms of their data and their approach. Yeah, and I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany to talk a bit more.
I think mic is working. So thank you, Melissa. So hi, I'm Tiffany. I'm going to explain the two other questions that we dig into, following by Melissa's first question, which is more exploratory. So the next question we're looking at is how recycling points distributed across the UK. And that's actually a huge highlight of it because the distribution matters to how it looks like on the map. And our volunteers actually come up with all sorts of map solutions that you could possibly find online. And I'm just taking 3 examples here to show you what kind of things that come up in the 2 days. So the first one, Tableau. We also have Power BI as well, basically BI tool. And as maybe you can't consider it as simple as it is, but this actually provides material focus a view of the distribution that they have never tried before on the map, especially the tooltip part. You might think that, it's just a tooltip, but the things that they provided on the tooltips actually collectively shows the metrics that they wouldn't think of it. They can put on the map and look at it as a whole before. And the next one, Carto. Carto is a software that you can do spatial analysis. It's quite well known and popular in the map spatial analysis surface. So in this particular case, we actually overlay 3 majority data sets. One is the recycling location, 1 km by 1 km population grid, and also the 60 minutes travel time isochrone. This doesn't necessarily provide any specific information for material focus, but it actually gives material focus an overview of how can they use the tool, because in these options of tools, you can toggle the filters as well as putting on the map as they wish to. So sometimes they can overlay 2 maps instead of 3. And this also provides an opportunity to input more information on the map if they wish to in the future. The next one is Streamlit, which is an open source Python library. Although the information that it provides on this map is basically the same as the previous one on the Carto, but this also is another solution that the charity didn't actually think of before. And this 3 maps options is actually providing the charities to think of if there's any opportunity for them to develop their own tools. And then the next question that we look into, because we look at them on the map for the visualization, which is actually something that excites them the most, because they never look at their data in a above 2D, because they use Excel basically, above 2D situation. So the next one is we want to actually extract some insight above just looking at it on the map. And the first actually thing that we're looking to is the accessibility. By looking at the isochrome, looking at the travel time isochrome, we managed to calculate the average travel time to two different kinds of dimension. One is to any kinds of recycling location, which might include recycling location that is not taking a wide range of electricals versus those that are taking most electricals, which includes a wider range. And the implication is when the recycling location take a wider range of electricals, it might be not as evenly spread out in the local authority, and hence the increment of the travel times on the right side of the slide. And then it leads us to the next slide, which is how do we increase the accessibility? Because obviously, if the recycling point's not accepting most electricals, people have to walk or travel longer distance to recycle those electricals. And then we actually dig into vehicle types, commute patterns, if there are students or not. We found out that if we can make the retailers accepting more electricals type, you can actually increase the, more specifically, 15 minutes travel times for people that don't have vehicles options. But at the same time, for the 30 minutes and 60 minutes travel times, it also shows increase of accessibility if we let the retailers accept more electrical types. Sorry. And then, so that is, that is the three questions that is the three questions we dig into, the three aspects. But the overall impact that we have for material code focus is for those information that is quite high level information. It's actually enough for them to have a pointer to start influence the local authorities and national retailers. As we mentioned that if we let the local retailers accept more electricals, it might drastically increase the accessibility for people to recycle their electricals. And then with these, they have better ideas where to direct the funding and what to communicate in campaigns when they sometimes have to communicate with the local authority or the governmental entities. Last, they actually start aware how important it is to bring data professionals. That's why they actually start to recruit data analysts to build and extend the work that we have done throughout the weekend. And then also leads to our overall recommendations. So although we actually gave them a list of tools that they might be able to use, for example, using Tableau as a visualization tool, or using Postgres as a database, using Airflow as a ETL orchestrators. These all require a certain level of data knowledge. That's why we also kind of recommend them to bring in data professionals to help them onboard the data infrastructure, and they actually did. And then, so that's basically the wrap-up of our material focus report. And these are all done by our amazing volunteers. Everyone have their own day job, but then when they put together their thought and ideas, it is, you can see that the whole report is actually quite well thought. And you might think, how can I be part of it? There's a few ways you can be involved. So these are the data dive pictures that we had before. Even in 2020, when we held the events online, you can see there are so many faces on the bottom right. And there are 3 ways you can get involved. One is sign on as a volunteer. That's what we did in the beginning. Me and Melissa, we started as a hackathon attendees, and then we slowly get more and more involved with the communities. You can also donate because DataKind is a charity, so it's always, they're always open to donation. And lastly, there are all sorts of sponsor plan that you can involve with them. And if you want to know more about it, feel free to reach out DataKind or talk to us. We're happy to help you connect with DataKind. And these are the few ways you can get in touch with us. You can go to DataKind UK website, or we have linking group and also Slack group. If you want to join Slack, please email us. And lastly, do you guys have any questions?
Thank you for such a great talk. I really hope I can. Is the mic on? I really hope I can be part of the hackathon in July. So if you can have a word with someone, that'd be good. Okay, I'll start with the questions. Who's easiest?
Thanks so much for a really interesting presentation. Do you know anything about how DataKind selects their charities to include in the hackathons?
Take the microphone back, I think. Yeah, so I think as a charity, you can get in contact with DataKind, and there's an application process that they'll go through. It then goes through a scoping and impact committee, which is actually also a set of volunteers like us who get involved and go through the project and think about what makes sense for the charity. It depends a lot on sort of the charity's what we call data maturity, so whether they have data at all that you can look at. Obviously, it's very hard to do a project if no data is being collected yet, and then what kinds of resources they actually have, and then that's where they'll kind of decide what makes sense in terms of like shorter term like data dives or longer term embedded projects.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I found the features bit really interesting. The examples that you gave. My question's around specifically with the recycling project. Is there any data that the team really wanted but didn't have access to, or I don't know, data sets that they thought of but just weren't available?
We have a volunteer and we have someone in the room who's actually worked on the project. I don't know if you wanted to talk.
Sure. Didn't expect to speak, but okay. It was about a year ago, so I'm trying to remember. Was there any data? I think some stuff around how retailers recycled stuff, which retailers actually accepted recycling, because most retailers, if you sell a type of electrical, you're supposed to also recycle it. But we didn't have any information on how prominent the recycling points were in stores, what the uptake was, that sort of thing. That would have been very useful. Yeah.
Do you have any other questions? Yeah.
I remember there was also some things around like figuring out which recycling centers actually collect, like whether they were sort of functionally collecting things or whether they just said they collected things. So there's a little bit of that as well.
Right.
Yeah, so my question was also around that recycling data. So you said the curbside thing wasn't really working, so I wondered if there was a cost with that, because some local authorities do charge to collect certain things that aren't the standard norm. So I wondered if actually part of that, it wasn't being used, was because there was actually an associated cost to it, potentially.
I'm not sure if we have enough. I don't think we know that.
No, that's a really good question. I think that the sort of conclusion from that really was that it was something that you needed to dig in a little bit more into, because it's kind of one of those unexpected findings, but not quite enough time to understand why, because it was only in the Saturday, Sunday. I'm not sure if there was anything that they learned later.
Yeah, I don't think we have enough information to know the cause of it, but why we kind of emphasize it is because the charity comes in and they think that curbside can be a really huge drive for this pattern, but it turns out to be the least. You see it's on the bottom of the chart, so that's why it's quite surprising to them.
Yeah. It's not to say that curbside pickup doesn't work or that people aren't using it, but just that it didn't seem that it would predict at a local authority level like additional weight of electricals recycling as compared to other things that seemed like stronger predictors.
Hi, that was an amazing talk. Thank you. I'm just kind of wanted to ask about like projects that you guys do and kind of like, for example, like past projects that you've talked about. For example, someone like me who'd be interested in volunteering. When someone volunteers, do you guys work on like the next project, or do you guys at some point also go back at like previous project that maybe for some reason I'd be interested in kind of looking into as well, or like deeper into it? Or is it more of like what's next kind of the project is?
So when you first, in that 2 days event, it's actually running as like a 10 weeks project, but the highlight of that is the data dive weekend, which happens for 2 days. We mostly started as hackathon volunteers for 2 days, but if you want to get more involved, we also recruit data ambassador, which you get involved from the very beginning of the project, and after the hackathon, you actually wrap up the report. So you actually have the end-to-end involvement instead of just 2 days. And that is actually much more rewarding than just doing 2 days if you want to get deeper into it.
Yeah, the question around whether past projects, there have definitely been repeat, like DataKind UK has worked with some charities multiple times over. And that's quite rewarding because you kind of see how they've, like, where the charity has gone from the first time they worked with it to the second. Then there's also some longer term projects that have happened in the past too, where it'll be like a few volunteers sort of more embedded in a specific charity and not just kind of looking at this exploratory, like the data dives I think work really well for, we've got a lot of data, we don't really know, we've got like many questions, a lot of data, let's all go and like see what we can find. And then like sort of more targeted, like longer term projects have also happened as well. And we've also, the Scoping and Impact Committee always goes back and kind of revisits what the impact of what the work has been. In the case of this particular one, I think Material Focus very recently recruited for like a data analytics, data analyst consultant.
Like
Sorry?
Yeah, I was
Something
just
like
about
that.
to say they also kind of recruit their own, because if they pair with DataKind, we have limited capacity. So normally, if they really want to work on that, they might recruit their own data professional. And if you're really interested, you can reach out to them and say, hey, I really want to keep working on this. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely encourage, like, I mean, the idea is to build up and upskill charities and kind of encourage them to actually have their own in-house data professionals.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah.
So yeah, on that topic, were they left with a product at the end that they could update, or was it sort of a one-off? And as you used Tableau, did they have a license cost for that, or did you just do that for them?
Yeah, I can actually make the Tableau myself in that slide. So we didn't actually hand over the product itself. It's just for them to know what options out there they can use. I don't imagine. I think you can also attach the file to them, but they normally don't know how to use it because they don't have the profession. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think we've worked on previous projects as well, where a lot of times this happens where like you can build a really nice model in Python and something, but nobody has Python that they can then go back and use, which is where we kind of encourage them to like sort of upskill and hire their own in-house analytics. They usually receive all of the files for everything after, and in like a previous project I worked in, we did actually like have a little bit longer after the data dive. We kind of consulted with them for a little bit longer because they decided they wanted to acquire a license for like Power BI. I think it was Power BI or something like that. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
So that's why I think in the recommendation slide, I kind of emphasize that we provide them open source recommendation because most of them can be free. And for Tableau or Power BI, there's different tiers of usage. If you're a free user, you probably can, because they don't really need that much functions in a sense. So sometimes it is quite enough for them already.
Brilliant. Do we have any more questions? Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. It was really interesting, and the project seems really interesting. It might be a very specific question, but for the material focus data, did it also include like trade-in data for people who've traded in electronics? Because that's also a kind of recycling.
I don't think it did. Did it? It did. Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because if it's more a case of just curbside and like putting electronics, if it's like lower income people, it's also possible that they just are more likely to trade in electronics. So it was just something I was curious about. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions before we finish? No more. Great. Thanks. If you can put your hands together again for Melissa and Tiffany. And if you want to get involved with DataKind, then they've left some kind of leaflets and things next to the door. So just remember to pick it up before you leave. So it'll give you kind of instructions on how to join. And I think they're doing some great work, and I can't wait to be part of it as well. We're gonna finish early. If you want to stay in the room, we've got Dario Canone up next. He's in the crowd. Thank you very much, and can help you have a great rest of your day.